Okay, welcome to our discussion on the Industrial Revolution, and for what I apologize is going to be a really rather long ed puzzle. So you may choose to watch it in two parts if you need to. All right, so we're looking at the Industrial Revolution. So we've spent chapter 21 talking about different revolutions in I'm sorry, I paused. We talked about different revolutions that were going on worldwide. We looked at, but those are all really revolutions of the mind and of politics, right? The Enlightenment's a revolution of the mind. The scientific revolution is a revolution of the mind. The French Revolution is a revolution of politics, and so on and so forth. And so, what we're going to go back and look at is the same time period, right? So, we're still in period 5, 1750 to 1900, what's known as the Industrial Revolution, and how that impact and change in technology and change in economic structure will influence not only the revolution, the political revolutions that go on, but other things that will come up, and how it will greatly influence the era of imperialism. So here we go, for better or worse. And eventually, there we go. All right, so most people before the Industrial Revolution, most people lived in rural villages and small communities. Farming was the major economic sector. We've talked about different kinds of trade for pretty much every country that we've gone to post-exploration, and we talked about how they were trading, but we kept going back to, even though they're doing this, the main thing is that they are participating in farming. Farming is what's bringing everything in. It's the top industry, et cetera, et cetera. So life's really hard. A lot of it's because of poor nutrition. A lot of it is because of poor sanitation. There are no vaccines. Medicine is still in its infancy, really. So diseases are common. Infant mortality is extremely high. A third of babies died before they were a year old. That was super, super common. You may have had given birth to 15 children, but you may only have 9 that live into adulthood. Life expectancy is 40 years, maybe a little bit older. And as we move forward in the Industrial Revolution and increases in science and sanitation, etc., life expectancy obviously goes up. Private and public farmlands were not separated or fenced off, and we're primarily talking about Europe at this point. So it's easy for you to have joint farmland, community farmland, local area farmland, and it allowed people who were not necessarily wealthy to participate in farming without owning the land. Now, of course, they had to pay for the use of the land, but some of the lands were public farmlands and anyone could use them. So it's really easy for families and farmers to work the land cooperatively and productively. All daily activities revolved around farming. Everything revolved around that. Your whole life was about farming and taking care of your farm and protecting your livestock if you had livestock, or your crops. Everything's based on that. So early industries, we see Great Britain has the wool industry, and wool obviously is used for production of cloth and clothing, etc. They use what's known as the domestic system. So the products that are made, they're made at home. That's how you get, or why you have the word domestic, because it's the domestic system. Right, so they're producing them at home. Workers set their own hours. They could take care of the domestic duties. A lot of times this is looking at women who are doing this. Women are taking care of the kids. They're cooking, they're cleaning, but they're also making money at home. So this is women, typically women, not always, working in this domestic system where you're producing goods, but you're doing so in your home. Coal mining is another industry because a lot of coal fields lay under that farmland. Now this is something that you're seeing the men doing with the mining. So there begins to be a change. Now, the real change from people living in rural life to urban life greatly begins post-industrial revolution, but you have those stirrings of people beginning to move to the cities, particularly in Great Britain, because they had the open field system where farmers could plant crops on unfenced and private and public lands. But then they started moving towards something known as the enclosure movement. And they were passing laws that allowed landowners to take over and fence off their private and common and other common lands. So let's say that you were a farmer and a sheep herder and you didn't own the land, you were just using common lands, and now it's fenced off and you don't have access to it. You don't have a choice but to move to the city and seek an occupation there. At the same time, there are a series of improvements within agricultural. So there are inventions that are helping agriculture. There's lighter oh my goodness. There's lighter plows. You're doing selective animal breeding. So you're making sure that you are purposely breeding the strongest and the best. You are purposely even perfecting the breed itself. Crop rotation. I'm not planting the same crop in a field year after year after year so the soil is exhausted. I'm rotating it. Higher yield seeds, the seeds you have are better. And so what you have is all these innovations, one, make farming easier. They also require less people to be involved. There's less human labor needed. And you're putting out more farm products than you ever had before. So because there is a lot of supply and your demand's not necessarily changing, food prices are lowering. And so a lot of people, for economic reasons or because they don't have the access to the land, they're choosing to / kind of being forced to move to towns and cities to find work. So you see this increase in people moving to urban areas looking for jobs. It is the same reason that in 2019 people would move to urban areas. There's just more there. There's more opportunity. So between 1400 and 1800, there is a rapid population growth worldwide. As a result of this growth, there is a strain on energy resources, particularly wood and charcoal, which were used for energy resources, and they begin to become scarce. They're just not around. So the Industrial Revolution is the response to this dilemma. It's the response to the idea that we don't have these things and we need these things and we need to find a way to produce this energy without using wood or charcoal. And the answer to this really is coal, to some degree oil later on, and to some degree natural gas. But these new fuel sources that were discovered in coal and in oil, once the oil pumps became perfected and natural gas meant it doesn't matter what the wood and charcoal is, we can now use these for energy sources. But the new fuels led to increased output and increased rate of technological innovation because they were able to put out more energy than you could get from the wood. Energy produced, there's more coming from the coal than there is from the wood. So we want to look at why Europe. Why does the Industrial Revolution occur in Europe? What's going on? What makes that happen? Why is it special? Okay, so why is it in Europe? Why doesn't the Industrial Revolution start in Latin America? Why does it start in the United States? We are looking at the Industrial Revolution years of being that's not what I meant. Around circa 1760 to around 1760 to about 1820 to 1840 are considered the years of the Industrial Revolution. So the Industrial Revolution, again, is considered as starting around 1760 and ending around 1820, 1840. So why Europe? One, Europe's internal development favored innovation. They were small, they were highly competitive states and countries, and they encouraged economic and technological progress so that you could be the nation to dominate. The newness of a lot of the European states and their monarchies, they need revenue because their tax systems, due to a lot of the revolutions and upheaval and change of governments, were kind of kaput, and they needed more income. That allowed the leaders to form alliances with the merchant classes. And a lot of these merchant classes, remember, they're not up there on the social scale the way that they want to be. And so they're eager to form alliances with leaders in an effort to not only make more money, but also move up socially. So merchants are granted certain privileges for exchange and loans to governments. Merchants are granted freedom from state control. The government promoted commerce, science, and innovation. It benefits everybody the more technologically advanced you can become. The merchants are benefiting because they're making a lot of money. The governments are getting loans from these merchants. The merchants are then getting in exchange for it a way to climb up the social ladder. Why Europe? Why Europe? Europe had widespread contact with a whole bunch of different people because of colonization, because of exploration, right? Great Britain has control of areas in India and other areas in Southeast Asia. Spain has control of areas in Latin America. So that colonization that happened earlier is proving beneficial because they have lots of contact with people throughout the globe. And so they're able to exchange these ideas and also the products from them. Competition from desirable, high quality foreign products. I don't want to be, if I'm in Great Britain and everybody now wants porcelain from China, well, why can't we make it? Why does another country need to get rich making a product that we can figure out how to do ourselves? Colonies and the Americans um, gave the Europeans markets to buy products. They had raw materials, whether it's silver down in Latin and South America, or whether it's looking at tobacco in North American areas. They have this access to raw materials. They will eventually feel like they run out, and that's going to be a push for imperialism. But it's this idea that the European nations are competing with one another. They have access to a variety of cultures and peoples thanks to colonization. They are pushing to increase technology. The merchants are pushing for this because they want to benefit and move up socially. Now, why Great Britain? So the Industrial Revolution, 1760-ish to 1820, 1840-ish, really is credited with starting in Great Britain and then proceeding elsewhere. Many very wealthy British aristocrats had capital and money to invest in labor, machines, and raw materials. They simply had the cash flow. They had become wealthy because of the transatlantic trade, because of colonization, and they were able to use it. Think about it. With the date of 1760, America has not yet revolted, right? That doesn't happen until 1770s. So they have access to natural resources, either there in Great Britain or amongst their many, many colonies. They have access to the iron and coal, and they have people to get it for them. They have harbors and rivers for good transportation, as well as to use for power. Why Britain again? They have a large labor supply. People are moving to the cities. I can't work as a farmer. I got to do something. The farms needed fewer workers, their men to work in the factories, and then because Great Britain allowed religious toleration and they had people coming in there from other areas that were persecuted for their religion, they're having an increased population. They're having this increased immigration. The British government favors businessmen. They pass tariffs, which is a tax on all imports to keep out foreign products. They want to build up British products. The laws made it easy to form companies. They don't allow workers' unions, so you don't have to worry about the workers joining together and trying to get rights. You can use the workers however you want. They had built a lot of internal infrastructure, whether it be roads or canals, that were used to transport goods and allow that internal transport to happen. They had patent laws that have protected inventors. So if you invent a product, you don't have to worry about Phil down the street stealing your idea and using it to make money. You could have a patent law which protects you. So they're right for industry, they're right for business, they're right for innovation in a way that the other countries didn't tick all those boxes. They didn't check them all. The scientific revolution had started in England. And it's that focus on reasonable logistical thought, and it leads to experimentation, creation of technology. And then something that really doesn't have anything that Britain controlled: their geography and their history. They're an island. They were more protected from invasion than other areas, and they did not have violent revolutions like you saw in other parts of Europe. I understand that the American Revolution was a war. I entirely get that, but it didn't happen in England. So let's talk about the textile industry. When we talk about textile, that is cloth made from cotton. Wouldn't you love to be able to wear cloth made from cotton rather than a wool outfit? Heck, even if you're making it from wool, it's an easier way to do it. Jane's not having to do it all by herself. We now have the capacity to do it. You have the flying shuttle, which you would see, it's kind of like it's a modern day weaving loom, so that you were able to move at a faster pace. The spinning jenny allows you to spin thread more quickly. You need to know the inventions and you need to know what they do, but you also need to know the big picture. And the big picture is this: it allows you to make products quicker. The reason we have technology is technology in general increases the rate with which you can do things. It is more reliable than human labor. Most of the time, increase in technology means a decrease in the need for human labor. And I say most of the time because we're going to have examples where that's not the case. The water frame is a huge spinning frame that ran continuously on water power. Someone doesn't have to sit there with a foot pushing it or physically operate it. The power loom, that's a loom that allows weavers to keep up with the amount of thread use. And you can see here from the pictures, these are all actually look like they're done on a factory floor, which we're getting ready to talk about. But again, it's using science and technology and innovation to produce products faster. The more products you produce, the more money you make, but it also decreases the price and it makes these things affordable to other people. The cotton gin. The cotton gin is made in 1793 by a man named Eli Whitney. Now, cotton, if you ever look at cotton like, not a cotton ball, but like cotton from the cotton plant, the problem with cotton is that cotton inside it are seeds. In order to make cotton useful, which up until the cotton gin, it really wasn't useful, you have to be able to take the seeds out of the cotton. But the seeds are really sticky, and when you pull seeds out from cotton, you end up wasting most of the cotton ball. So he created this machine called the cotton gin, which allowed the cotton to be stretched and basically the seeds to like pull out. Now, in U.S. history, we'll talk about how the cotton gin actually leads to a massive increase in slavery in the United States, but it also leads to an increase in cotton that can raw material that can be bought and then used by other countries. America also produces, oh my goodness, also works in the Industrial Revolution as well. So the new textile machines, they're really, really big and they cost a lot. So we're moving out of domestic production. Sheila can't use the cotton gin in her house, it's too big. Sheila can't have that weaving loom, the powered weaving loom. She doesn't have the water source to use the water one. So now we start building these massive buildings and factories, and we develop the factory system. And that's an organized system of production that brings machines and workers together under the control of a manager. So now we're going to build these really big buildings. I'm going to stack them full of machines. They're going to run on these new energy sources, whether it's coal, which puts out massive amounts of dirty, nasty smoke into the air. Any of the waste from the factories are just going to be put out into the street or into the river system, so we're going to be causing massive pollution. But your owners of these factories are going to be making bank, and that's all people really care about. Now I need to hire a ton of people to work in my factory. Now I need to pay them as cheaply as possible, and I also need to make sure that I don't respect any worker rights, because every time I do that, that's going to cost me a lot of money. They'll build reforms later on. So most machines are powered by water, so they come up near factories. James Watt invents the steam engine, and that's an engine that runs on that uses a new power source, and so the factories don't necessarily have to be next to the water like they did before the invention of the steam engine. Henry Bessemer creates a process that ends up really making a difference. Now, here's what you're going to have with the Industrial Revolution. We're going to have time and time again, person, product, person, product, person, product. A studious world history AP student would be making a chart. You would go through your notes, you would write the name of the person and what they invented. It will be easy to study on later on. And say you have a quiz that expects you to know those things, it would be an easy study tool. So if it were me, it's certainly not. I already know the answers to these, but I would make a chart. It's just gosh darn helpful. I think you'll find it easier. All right, so the Bessemer process. The Bessemer process is invented by a guy named Henry Bessemer. It is perfected by a Scottish man who takes the idea to the United States named Andrew Carnegie. The Bessemer process allows you to make steel easily and cheaply. Steel has been used for years before, but it was really hard because in order to get steel, what you have to do is you have to take iron ore. You have to heat it to like a bajillion million degrees to where it liquefies. And when it liquefies, the impurities in the iron are um, vaporized off. And when that hot molten liquid cools, it forms steel. Steel is what allows for skyscrapers to be built because it can hold the frame. It increases the efficiency of railroads. Steel really changes the world in ways that nothing really else had. Bessemer process, easier, faster way to make steel, leads to increased railroads. The steam power leads to the steam locomotive. We are connecting places faster. We're making travel and communication faster, which means products can be spread faster. And all of this is happening in a very rapid pace, right? We're not looking at long in history. 1760, 1820s, 1840s, things are going crazy. And you're going to see this massive increase and build up in products and technology and the wealth of people all the way up through the early 1900s. Robert Fulton invents the steamboat. Now you can go up and down river. It's easier to go upstream. So this is a map that's just showing you the early phases of Europe's Industrial Revolution. Like I said, the Industrial Revolution will make its way to America, and we'll focus on that in U.S. history, and we'll touch on it briefly here. But if you look at the little red things, those are all coal fields, and you can see basically everyone has them, not Italy, but basically everyone. You see the railroad lines. Where do you see the most railroad lines? Great Britain. They go crazy. They railroad it up. The major industrial areas, again, most of them located in Great Britain, but you do see them over here in the Germanic lands. You see a little bit here in Italy, not really going on in Spain yet. Communication. Samuel Morse invents the telegraph. That's the deep. It allows you to have a thing right here, which is the telegraph. And you tap on it, and through telegraph wires that look like telephone wires, someone on the other end reads out the message that's done in Morse code, and they can translate it. Increases communication. Increased communication increases what businesses can do. Eventually, Alexander Graham Bell will invent the telephone. Electricity. We are giving Thomas Edison credit. I realize that Nikola Tesla does it first, but we're giving Thomas Edison credit. What can I do with electricity? What can I do with light? It banishes the darkness. I can run these factories 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because you can't say you can't see anymore. Electricity increases the efficiency of machines. All of these inventions are really geared toward increasing the capacity of businesses and technology. All right, other energies. I'm going to skip these. It's just ways to increase the engines that are around. You have increases in flight. The Wright brothers do the flight in North Carolina, although it's a really long time before flight is found useful. So airplane technology way in its infancy. Zeppelin creates the what looks like a really big blimp. It's the dirigible or dirigible. It's a way to get from one place to another quickly. Don't have to use the railroad, don't have to walk, don't have to use horse and buggy. So those are a bunch of inventions. Again, write down the name of the person and what they invented. And then if you don't know what they invented, what it does, write down what it does. If you can't remember what the spinning jenny does, write down what it does. I'm not saying you have to. I'm saying I would if I were you, which is a way of me saying you pretty much should. So how does society get changed by the Industrial Revolution? Well, let's look at before the Industrial Revolution. Where you were born depends, your position depends on birth. There's not a lot of social mobility. You are where you are. But the Industrial Revolution changes that. Your talents and your abilities bring about money and success, particularly in the United States. But worldwide, where they still do have an aristocracy, you often have these people that don't have titles that have way more money than your landed gentry. And it's allowing them to kind of buy their way into the aristocracy that they can't get by birth and that they wanted to. Land owning aristocrats on an individual basis did not suffer due to the Industrial Revolution. So on an individual person by person basis, they don't suffer. But the aristocracy as a class begins to decline. Their political power declines. Urban wealth becomes seen as more important than land ownership. And land ownership is seen that can be your basis of wealth, but it's not bringing in as much money as these people, as these entrepreneurs that own multiple factories, and the factory system are bringing. Things are changing. The old way of life is being challenged. The middle class, they benefited the most from industrialization. They are the real MVPs here. Size, the power, and the wealth of the middle class increases. And then you get levels to the middle class. The upper middle class is your factory and your mine owners, your bankers, your merchants, exceedingly wealthy. Think about people traveling in first class on the Titanic. Your middle levels are your smaller businessmen, your doctors, your lawyers, your professionals. Excuse me. Your lower levels are your clerks, your bank tellers, your more lower level, lower middle class people, an average income. But we hadn't seen that before. We just kept talking about these people in the middle class. But because the middle class expands to include so many people, because the aristocracy is left by people who have titles because they were either born with them or now in the cases they're buying them, you have to include that. Again, you can be in the upper level of the middle class and have more money than the Earl of Smithfield. The values begin to change. So your political values, constitutional government, private property, free trade, they are influenced by the Enlightenment. They want reforms in education and healthcare and prison reform. They don't necessarily want to share all their money. That's not where you're getting if you're in the upper middle class. But they certainly want private property respected. They don't want the government to come and take their stuff. The workers may feel differently. They value hard work. They value strict morality, cleanliness. They want to show that they are deserving to be in the aristocracy. They're deserving to be in the top spot, and they want to distinguish themselves from the dirty old workers who are the ones making them wealthy. They believed education and hard work were the keys to success. The self-made man. You are responsible for your own destiny. The poor are poor because they just aren't doing well. It is called social Darwinism. Write that word down. Social Darwinism. It is the belief that says the rich are rich because they work hard and the poor are poor because they don't. Now, we can disagree with that. That's fine. I'm just telling you what the word means. Men and women had very different roles. Men went to work. Women stayed home. Women were your homemakers, your mothers, your wives. They created the emotional haven for their husband. They are the moral center of the family. They are deciding how much shopping's doing. They are the ones to teach morality and respectability to their children. But they do not have equal rights, and they will be subservient to their husband. The man controls the household. Now the working class. The working class are really kind of different. They grow in numbers. They're working in the factories. They're working 6 days a week, 50, 60, 70, 80 hours. They are all ages, men, women, and children. They are paid very, very little. There are no codes to protect the worker. You get hurt on the job, too bad. That's unfortunate for you. You're going to be replaced. You're having a baby. Hope you're here tomorrow. The workers are treated abysmally. They are paid poorly, and they will become very unhappy. The conditions are dangerous. The rooms are unventilated. They're getting diseases like pneumonia, tuberculosis. They're dying from them. The work is the same thing hour after hour after hour after hour, day after day after day. You want to complain? That's fine. I'm fired. You're going to fire her and bring somebody else in. Women and children are paid the least. That's oftentimes why they're wanted. You had children as young as 6, in some cases 4, working in factories. Look at this little kid right here, barefoot. Can't even reach the machine. He's so small. There's no schooling. They can work through the night. Some women, young single girls, appreciated the independence that was given to them by working in the factories. They're known as mill girls. They have money, they have friends, they have a life outside their household. Yes, the working conditions are awful, but I got a sense of independence that I don't have when I become a married woman. And yes, there are married women working in factories, but it's usually unmarried. The working class live in overcrowded, dirty, unsanitary conditions. They live in cold apartments near the factories because I need you to not have an excuse why you can't get to work. Whole families are living in 1 and 2 rooms. You're compacted together because that's what you can afford, because that's what you're being paid. You are the working poor. You resent the upper middle class because you're working for them and making them millions of dollars, and you aren't benefiting and they don't care about you. You are have aspect to poor sanitation, poor diet, bad water. There's no sanitation. There's urine and feces in the streets, and you're living amongst it. You're bathing once or twice a year, and you're doing all of this, trying to provide a living for your family, but you're making the wealthy rich, and you aren't benefiting. And that's going to explain why the workers get so angry. They begin to complain and demand better working conditions. They form labor unions. Let's get our workers together, because together we are a force and we demand change. You won't do things, we're going to go on strike. How are you going to make any money if we aren't there? Now, it's not around 1924 to trade unions are legalized. They are illegal for the vast majority of it. Unions did strikes, they threatened violence, they used collective bargaining, which is when union leaders and employees meet together to discuss power. But remember, for the vast part of it, they are illegal, and we'll talk about those reforms later on. Many workers join friends societies, ways to get together to help each other out. Improvements in the second half of the 1800s really lead the working class movement away from revolution. The wages increase, cheap food becomes to get imported, so their diets increase. Because their diets increase, infant mortality rates fall. Shops and chain stores cater to the working class. All males are allowed the right to vote. Child labor will be abolished. Factory conditions will be regulated. Sanitation reform will occur. So all of these things will occur, and it really will answer a lot of the complaints that the lower classes have. So now we're going to talk about some philosophical beliefs that are connected to the labor union that I really want to make sure that we go over in class. I know that this Edpuzzle is long. I hope that you're watching it in 2 parts. This would be a great point to take a break. So all the changes within government lead to changes in idea of how government should function. Socialism, it is an economic system in which the factors of production are owned by the public, and all major industries are owned by the government. There's a sharing of them. We're sharing those ideas. You know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I am going to make sure that we discuss this in class, because these are ideas that I think might be better off us discussing as a group. So I'm going to cut this Edpuzzle off here, because I feel like you are going to have a lot of questions, and I know you're going to have a lot of questions about the philosophical ideas, so I want to make sure that you have the ability to ask those. So I'm cutting the Edpuzzle off here. We will do the others in class. If you are watching this in the 2019 group, you need to make sure, scratch that part.